hello and good afternoon. From my side, thank you very much for your invitation. It's an honor to present the activities of the Swiss National Science Foundation with regard to research integrity and with a special focus on plagiarism. My name is Nadja Capus. Since last year, I'm the president of the Integrity Commission, and it's a short time, and that's why Claudia Lautenschütz, she's mentioned on the slide, from the Legal Advisory Board of this commission, has provided me with very useful information, and I'd like to thank you very much, and I'm happy to share with you this information. So this is the agenda. I'll start with a very short comment from a criminological point of view regarding scientific misconduct in writing. The reason is simply because I'm a professor of criminal law and a criminologist. So this means I'm very interested in all kinds of deviant behavior on the one side, and very keen on the other hand on clear regulations based on which persons are going to be sanctioned finally. The main part of my presentation is dedicated to the SNSF and the research integrity at SNSF. So I will talk about history and background of the regulations itself regarding scientific misconduct, procedures and tools in the use at the SNSF. But of course, the SNSF is not the only actor. There are other players in the Swiss academic landscape, and they have other regulations and procedures on which I will have a look very briefly, but I will shortly look at them. And to finish my presentation, I'll compare the SNSF approach with approaches taken from the universities, and I will try to identify common denominators and differences as well as missing points. There are many ways researchers may misbehave while doing science. What I've been asked for is to focus on plagiarism and reproducing texts. We have talked about it this morning. IDs, words, or citations without giving credit is a behavior which is to be considered a wrong behavior. This is clear. This even more when it is done in the context of asking for funding. But let's also take into account our proper behavior. As a criminologist, I would like to underline the fact that we, the Commission of Research Integrity of the SNCF, as well as you as ombudspersons, we all are constructing, one could even say producing, scientific deviance or misconduct. We are constructing it with our practices of social reaction, with our control mechanisms, our interventions. We are doing so because public awareness has arisen and the demand to do so has risen. That is perfectly legitimate. But maybe the boundaries between tolerable and intolerable behavior, I'm thinking about auto-plagiarism mostly, have started to blur, causing confusion within scientific community and within the institutions where scientific practices take place. Therefore, clear distinctions are needed. Otherwise, dissuasive effect is going to be zero. Finally, interventions and integrity policies need to acknowledge the basic constraints of science, which is objectivity and collectivity, and go beyond a sole focus on individual responsibility. Preventive practices are to be developed, such as, for example, educational tools, which has been mentioned already, and the collective dimension of it. The collective dimension, the basic constraints, the system itself is propelling when focusing, for example, on the number of publications, on the rating of journals, etc. Now I'm getting concrete and start the presentation of what the Swiss National Science Foundation, the SNCF, is and does with regard to research integrity. The Swiss National Science Foundation is Switzerland's foremost research founding agency. It funds research in all disciplines with a special focus on young researchers. SNCF funds basic research as well as use-inspired basic research. So applicants come from universities, universities of applied science as well, universities of teacher education, and from research institutions outside the higher education sector as well. Each year, the Swiss National Science Foundation invests over 900 million Swiss francs in more than 3,000 projects involving more than 14,000 researchers. Each year, we have about more than 2,400 applications for project funding. We have nearly 3,000 applications in career funding and several hundred applications in national research programs, national competence centers in research and infrastructures, and so on, which are submitted each year. So let's look now at the very short history of integrity regulation. It was back in 2009 that the SNSF started to regulate on academic integrity because, as far as I know, public awareness has risen by then and scientific integrity has become a topic of interest on an international and national level. Moreover, and it had certainly had an impact on that, the Swiss Academies of Art and Science, an association englobing different academies engaged in scientific networks and the dialogue between science and society, established a Commission for Scientific Integrity back in 2006 and published then guidelines on integrities in scientific research in 2008, so 1 year before the SNCF has taken on. In accordance to European consensus, I think the SNCF defines scientific misconduct as appropriation of another person's results or findings as one's own, which is plagiarism, including auto-plagiarism as well. Own results and own previously used formulations must also be cited and indicated as such. Moreover, falsification or manipulation of facts, violation of another person's intellectual property rights, interference in some other way with another person's research activity. The regulation includes also a very large clause dealing with all breaching the rules of scientific integrity and good scientific practice in some other way. It's not specified. According to the SNCF regulation, scientific misconduct may also be committed by persons who are complicit in such misconduct, so co-authors and co-applicants have a co-responsibility. And I do underline that to be guilty of plagiarism does not depend on whether the act has been committed deliberately or negligent. In short, I think the standard is the same as for publications. So I would say the SNCF regulations focus on the most common cases of misconduct in application procedure. There are further definitions of cases of scientific misconduct in an annex to the regulation as well. It's all published on the homepage of the SNCF. The majority of cases SNCF deals with concern plagiarism within the submitted research plan. It contains text that is not properly quoted. To give you an example, a not serious case could consist in taking single sentences from another person's publications without clearly marking them as copied, for example, without inverted commas or without citation in clear proximity. A rather serious case could more consist in copying full paragraphs from other persons' publications or research work without clearly marking them as copied. If this occurs moreover in the hypothesis part of the own scientific plan, this is, of course, considered an aggravating factor. Suspicious cases resulting from a check with the software program or, more often, a notification from an expert evaluating the application are being analyzed then by the plagiarism control group. In minor errors, that is, cases with only a small amount of plagiarized text, less than, because we have talked about scores this morning, less than 5% of the research plan, and moreover not in a critical part of the research plan, for example, state of their own research generalities, the applicants are reminded about the principles of scientific integrity and are advised to act accordingly. This reminder is only sent to the applicants. It is independent from the scientific evaluation of the research proposal and has no impact on the founding decision. More serious cases lead to the opening of a formal investigation by the SNCF Commission on Research Integrity. That is, the President, which I am, who is not a member of the National Research Council, a delegate from the relevant evaluation body of the National Research Council, a scientific officer in charge of the case, and a representative of the legal department, and in some cases, if necessary, an additional external expert. The scientific evaluation of the proposal is suspended during investigation. The severity of the misconduct is evaluated according where the plagiarized text appears, the type of text. Is it about generalities, as I have mentioned already, or does it really concern the supposed to be original results, the new idea? The severity of the misconduct is also being evaluated with regard to the quantity of the text, and we take into account extenuating or aggravating circumstances, like is it deliberately, has it happened deliberately or negligent, if we can investigate this. Is the author a junior or a senior researcher? Does he or she show a regretful or unreasonable in respect of the misconduct? Within the formal investigation, a scientific officer summarizes findings and formulates the suspicion. The applicant is invited to comment on the allegations. Members of the Commission are checked for conflict of interest. The applicant may be invited to appear in person before the Commission. The Commission decides about whether misconduct has taken place or not, and the Commission proposes a sanction. So the Commission only proposes a sanction to the presiding board of the National Research Council, who is then taking the final decision on the sanctioning. Here you can see where the presiding board is to be located within the different bodies of the SNCF, which do work at the different levels. On the top you can see the Foundation Council and Executive Committee, and then comes the National Research Council and 8 members, that is, all presidents of the divisions, the specialized committees, plus the overall president of the board itself, constitute the presiding board, which is going to decide finally on the sanctioning. The file is treated confidentially within the SNCF. The applicant has the right to appeal before the Federal Administrative Court. The decision may be made public or not, or communicated to third parties or not, And this is only the case exceptionally, I would say. As of the numbers, as you can see, in 2017, 118 randomly chosen grant applications were checked using software. Plus, because also of, as I already mentioned, notifications done by experts evaluating the applications. This is a very important contribution. The regulations protect anonymity of informers. Then only 12 suspicions were treated by the administrative office, the plagiarism control group. So you can see we have a sharp funnel shape. And of these 12 suspicions, 4 were cancelled, did not lead to any measures at all. 3 were classified as minor errors. 5 resulted in the opening of a formal inquiry by the Integrity Commission and in sanctions being taken for. In general terms, we can see and say that only a few cases of scientific misconduct are detected at the SNSF every year. I cannot say whether this means that researchers in Switzerland are extraordinarily compliant, law-abiding people, or whether the software programs are not very good we are using, and whether more should be invested in human resources within the administrative office. As of sanctions, you can see that the range goes from mere reprimands or warnings, and but it goes also to exclusion, and exclusion can mean exclusion only for a short time, for 6 months, for example, or up to 2 years, so for a very long time for a researcher. Now, the SNCF is not the only player, as I have mentioned, against plagiarism and scientific misconduct within the academic landscape of Switzerland. Let's have a quick look at the other players. The Swiss academic landscape counts 10 universities, 2 federal institutes of technology in the German and as well 1 in the French part of Switzerland, 9 universities of applied sciences, and 17 universities of teacher education. However, at universities of applied sciences and of teacher education level, research integrity is less prominently mentioned, and here are yet no, and there are no dedicated processes to deal with research integrity cases. So there is, as I can say, a lot to do. Swiss universities, on the other hand, have processes to handle cases of scientific misconduct. Unfortunately, though, due to the autonomy of universities, they have developed different processes. Some have installed an ombudsperson or person of trust who acts as first contact for any queries in connection with integrity. The ombudsperson listens to both parties and tries to find amicable solutions or gives advice on further steps to be taken. This person may also give advice on good scientific practices within the university. If the ombudsperson cannot solve a conflict, the case then is referred to another body who will decide about the opening of an investigation. Other universities, like for example the University of Bern, have a person in charge of integrity. In addition to the tasks of the aforementioned ombudsperson, this person will take the lead in the investigation itself. He or she reports the results of the investigation to the management of the university, and the management of the university will then decide about possible sanctions. Integrity may also be defined as a management task. In these cases, the rectorate makes preliminary investigations and decides if the case has to be referred to external specialists like at the University of St. Gallen, or to a specialized commission like on my own university, the University of Neuchâtel. In all systems, sanctions are decided by the highest university's bodies, that is, Rectorate, Senate of the university. Now, how does the SNCF interplay with the universities? Should misconduct be revealed in the context with the application procedure for SNCF grants, then it will be the SNCF who has the primary responsibility. If misconduct happens in the use of SNCF grants, then the primary responsibility for the investigation and sanctioning lies within the research institution that employs the researcher. So the responsibility is splitted. This system does only function if universities do check and open investigations and if they inform the SNCF. And then the SNCF can, for example, postpone its own investigation and may suspend the grant. The SNCF will, from his side, communicate results of investigations and sanctions to the concerned institutions, with the exceptions, though, of warnings and reprimands. These are only communicated to the applicant himself. The legal basis for this sharing of information, of confidential information, of course, is from the side of the SNCF to be found in the Federal Act on the Promotion of Research and Innovation. So we have a legal basis for this sharing of information. To finish my presentation, I will compare the SNCF approach now with the approaches of the universities, which I have presented already, identify common denominators and differences, as well as maybe the missing points. A common denominator is certainly that most regulations contain a list of offenses that amount to scientific misconduct, and they use the same categories of offenses. On the other side, there are a lot of differences regarding the procedures. This makes it difficult to compare cases. Moreover, there is a margin of discretion if a university decides to open an investigation or not. And, not very surprising according to me, some institutions are less ready to admit their in-house research integrity cases than others. It would be very helpful to standardize the procedures and conditions with regard to opening an investigation and with regard also to communication to the SNCF. There are also differences in the way institutions sanction. Some postpone career opportunities for younger researchers. Others ban their employees from professional activities for a limited period of time. Some install additional control mechanisms, but do not really sanction. So similar sanctions for similar cases of misconduct would make the procedure more transparent and comparable and just. Now, what is missing? According to us, a generally valid and binding code, maybe also a revision and a discussion of handling auto-plagiarism in applicant procedures, regulations on a statutory limitation for the investigation of cases. With regard of the legal basis, regulations in university statutes allowing the exchange of information about cases. There seems to be a problem with that. And in general, more standardized regulations on the proceedings and sanctions. And a national body maybe, a national body that is informed about all cases and gives advice or even binding recommendations. coordinates cases that concern more than one institution. And this would for sure ensure transparency and equality. I thank you very much for your attention.